Hello everyone, and welcome to our 9.3 lesson on special right triangles. This is part 2, and the second special right triangle that we're going to talk about, we talked about 45, 45, 90 yesterday. Today we're going to talk about a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So I want you to think back. In a 45, 45, 90 triangle, two of the angles matched, and that formed an isosceles triangle, and so two of the legs were congruent, and then we had a hypotenuse. Because all three of these are different angle measures, we're going to have all three side lengths in a 30, 60, 90 being different size. So we'll have a small side, we'll have a medium side, and we'll have a long side. So we'll have the shortest and we'll have the longest. Of course, the longest is still going to be across from the 90. So I always start with my short leg. So let's just kind of look at what these triangles look like. Here's my 30-degree angle, and there's the side that's across from it. So that's the shortest side. Here's my 60-degree angle. Of course, that's the medium amount. So then that's my medium length, and there's my 90-degree angle, so here's my hypotenuse. So let's label that first. We have two different size legs now, so what we're going to do is we're going to label those as short leg and long leg. So this will be our short leg. That's our shortest leg between the two. This will be my longest leg between the two, and then we are going to have our hypotenuse. Okay? So we're going to abbreviate those so we don't have to write those over and over again. We'll call this our SL, we'll call this our LL, and we'll call this our hype. You're going to hear me call that the hype man a lot in this lesson. So we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, and there are special relationships that exist within a 30, 60, 90 triangle. It says that this hypotenuse, and we're going to kind of discover this in class, but this hypotenuse is going to be 2 times the amount of the short leg. So you take the short leg and you double it, okay? So let's do that with letters here. If this is X, if we know that our short leg is X, I'm going to do that in yellow. If we know that our short leg is X, to get to the hypotenuse, we are going to multiply by 2. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to go from here to here to this pink hypotenuse. You're going to multiply by 2. So I'm going to say times 2. So that would be 2X. 2X would be my expression there. 2X is my expression for the hypotenuse, whereas X was the expression for the short leg. So what does that mean if you wanted to go the other way? If you're going from a hypotenuse back to the short leg, you're going to divide by 2. Divide by whole number 2. Those are inverse operations. Okay? What does it say about my long leg? My long leg is still going to be equal to the short leg times the square root of 3. So this is a dumb way to remember it, but it just works. We talked about the twin triangle yesterday, which was a 45, 45, 90, and that was root 2. The 30, 60, 90 starts with a 3. So that kind of reminds me, hey, this is going to be the one that goes with the twin triangle is root 2. The one that goes with the 30, 60, 90 is root 3. So what does that mean? If I want to go from this short leg, X, to the long leg, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply X times the square root of 3. So I'm going to go times root 3. So that will be X root 3 for that expression, X root 3. And so what if you wanted to go the other way? What if you had the long leg and you wanted to go backwards and you wanted to go to the short leg? You're going to divide by root 3. So essentially what's going to happen is my short leg is the ticket around this triangle. It gets me into the long leg and it gives me the hypotenuse. So if I have the hypotenuse and I want the long leg, I have to go grab the short leg first before I go get the long leg. Okay, so these are our rules. We have a X, X root 3, and 2X. We have our short leg, long leg, and our hypotenuse. And I did want to mention, just like yesterday, when you cut a square at its diagonal, it created a 45, 45, 90 triangle. Now this shape can be formed whenever you take an equilateral triangle. Of course, we know an equilateral triangle is where all the sides are the same and all of the angles are 60 degrees. So if all of those angles are 60, and you draw in the altitude, think about like a plane, the altitude is the height, or how high up the plane is from the ground. So when we draw that in, it looks like this, straight line down to the ground. And that is going to bisect that triangle into a 30, 60, 90, a congruent 30, 60, 90 on each side. And so I have this yellow 30, 60, 90 triangle that's on the right, and I have a congruent 30, 60, 90 triangle on the left. So if you take an equilateral triangle and cut it and bisect it at one of its angles, it's going to create 30, 60, 90 triangles, 2 30, 60, 90 triangles. Okay, so I color code. You'll know I'm really big on this. This really helps me solve for the unknown values in the special right triangle. So the first thing you want to do is make sure it's special. I know that they say it is in the directions, but I'm going to color code. So always look for that 30-degree angle first. It's a right triangle. It's got a 30, which means it's also going to have a 60. So here's my short leg. Here's my long leg across from the 60, and here's my hypotenuse. I'm going to label that on the first view, and then I'll probably slow down on labeling. I probably won't do it as much as we go along. So here's my long leg, and then here's my hypotenuse. This is my height. Okay? So what we currently have is we have our shortest leg. So how do we get to the hypotenuse? Oh, good. Yeah, how do we get to the hypotenuse? What is my relationship? To get to the hypotenuse, we take the short leg, which is currently 12, and we want to multiply that 12 by 2. We take that whole number 12, which is what the yellow amount was, and we're going to multiply that by 2. So what happens when you do 12 times 2? That is going to give me 24 for my hypotenuse. So my hypotenuse value is 24. It is just double the short leg. So x is 24. Okay? How do we get to the long leg from the short leg? We are going to multiply, because it's getting bigger, so that also helps you remember to multiply. I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3. So I'm going to take 12, which is my current short leg, and I'm going to multiply that by root 3. 12 times root 3. What is 12 times root 3? That is just going to give us 12 root 3. It doesn't simplify at all. There's no perfect squares besides one that I can take out of that. And so my long leg was 12 root 3. And then my hypotenuse, let me color code this just at the beginning just to really help y'all out, that my hypotenuse value is going to be 24. 24. Okay, so this fits our pattern. Short leg is x, long leg is x root 3, hypotenuse is 2x. So let's go here. The problem on this picture is that we don't have a 30-degree angle, but I do have a 60-degree angle. And so if this is my 60-degree angle, that forces this to be 30 by the triangle angle sum theorem. So my short leg is x on this picture. My long leg is going to be 5 root 3. That's given in the picture, in my diagram. And then my hypotenuse is marked with a y. So this time it's a little bit different because I do not have my short leg. And remember we talked about how this short leg is the ticket around this triangle. You really need the short leg if you're going to find the hypotenuse. Remember the hypotenuse is double the yellow. Well, I can't find pink if I don't have the yellow. So how do I go from blue back to yellow? We're getting smaller. So instead of multiplying by root 3 to go from the short leg to the long leg, to go from the long leg to the short leg, we are going to divide by root 3. So we're going to take what's currently there. What's currently there is the blue piece, 5 root 3. And we're going to divide that by root 3 because they told us that's the relationship. Those root 3s are going to cancel out. And what are you left with? I am left with 5. So my x value is 5. My short leg is 5. Why does that help me? Because I know in order to go from my short leg to my hypotenuse, I'm going to double it. I'm going to take the 5, which is my current value for yellow, and I'm going to multiply that times 2 holes. 5 holes times 2 holes is going to give me 10 holes. So y is 10. Okay, so then that fits our pattern, x, x root 3, and 2x. Okay, so let's keep going. Is this a 30, 60, 90 triangle? It is. Here's my 30. So here's my short leg. Again, I don't have it this time, so I'm going to have to find it. Here's my long leg across from the 60. And then here is my hypotenuse. So this one's a little bit different because what they give you is the hypotenuse. So if my hypotenuse is 16, how do I go from a hypotenuse back to the short leg, which is what I'm wanting to try to find in order to find the other y value as well? I need to find x first. It's getting smaller, so instead of multiplying by 2, like you do when you go from the short leg to the hypotenuse, your height man, to go from the height man back to the short leg, you're going to divide by 2. That short leg is exactly half of that hypotenuse, meaning that 2 yellows would fit on that pink. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the yellow one, which is we're going to take the pink one, which is 16. We're going to take that 16 and we're going to divide that 16 by 2 holes. What is 16 divided by 2? That is going to give me 8. So x is 8. Once you know that that is 8, to go from the short leg to the long leg, remember that's times the square root of 3 because it's getting bigger. So we're going to take 8, which is our current yellow piece, and we're going to multiply that times root 3. What happens when you do 8 times root 3? You're going to get 8 root 3. 8 root 3. So my blue piece is 8 root 3. So I'm going to fill that in. Okay. So the first row is how most problems are going to look most often whenever you're working with whole numbers for the short leg or for the hypotenuse. But it does get a little bit trickier whenever you have a radical expression on the short leg. So let me show you what I'm talking about. First of all, is this a right triangle? Yes. Is it a 30, 60, 90? Yes, because this would be forced to be 30. So my short leg is 3 root 3. So thankfully we have our short leg, which means that this one's my long leg and that this one's my hypotenuse. So let's label that. Short leg, long leg, hype. if we want to go from our short leg to our long leg, we're going to take the yellow amount, which is 3 root 3, and we are going to multiply that by root 3. Well, what happens when you do 3 root 3 times root 3? That becomes 3 root 9. Why do I like that radical? Because it's a perfect square. So what is 3 times 3? 3 times, this is going to be 3 times 3, which is going to give me 9 wholes. So my long leg is going to be equal to 9. Long leg is 9 for x. Okay, let's go back to our ticket around the triangle, which is our short leg. What is the relationship between our short leg and our hypotenuse? It's getting bigger, so I'm going to multiply that by 2. What gets multiplied by 2? My current yellow value, which is 3 root 3. So I'm taking 3 root 3 and I am multiplying that by 2. So right now I've got 2 whole numbers. I've got 3 and I've got 2. Those 2 whole numbers I'm going to simplify. 3 times 2 becomes 6. And so then I have my value. That is going to be 6 root 3. So my hypotenuse is double 3 root 3, which is just 6 root 3. Double 3 root 3 is 6 root 3. So my final answer for that is going to be 6 root 3. Okay, so while this doesn't look like it fits the script, it still does. Our yellow value is 3 root 3. Our blue value is that times root 3. And then our pink value is that doubled, that yellow value doubled. All right, so let's keep going. We've got our 30, 60, 90 triangle. So here's my short leg. Here is my, there is my hypotenuse. And there is my long leg. So again, I have the x. I don't know it, so I'm going to need to find it in a second. I'm going to use one of the known values, either the hypotenuse or the long leg, to find it. I know my long leg, so I'm going to use the long leg to get to the short leg. So how do I go from the long leg back to the short leg? Well, remember that to get from the short leg to the long leg, it's times root 3. So to go the other way, I'm going to divide by root 3. So I'm going to take that blue amount, 9 root 2, and I'm going to divide it by root 3. Divide it by root 3. This is where you have to rationalize the denominator. So we talked about how a simplified radical fraction cannot have a radical in the denominator. So I'm going to have to rationalize by multiplying by root 3 over root 3 to turn that into a perfect square is the goal. So what we have now is 9 root 6 over 3. 9 over 3, because that's root 9, which is 3 wholes. 9 over 3 is going to simplify to 3 root 6. So this expression simplifies to 3 root 6, that yellow amount. So x is going to be 3 root 6. Okay, now that's our short leg. So how do I go from my short leg to my hypotenuse? To go from the short leg to the hypotenuse, you're getting bigger. You're going to get 2 times bigger. So I'm going to take the yellow amount, which is 3 root 6, and I'm going to double it. I'm going to multiply that by 2. That is 3 wholes times 2 wholes, which is going to be 6 root 6. 6 root 6 would be my final answer for the hypotenuse of this shape. And so I'm going to fill that in for our y value. That would be 6 root 6, which is double 3 root 6. So all of these radical rules are kind of coming back and coming all together today. All right, let's do a few more. Here's our 30-degree angle. So here's our short leg, which means that this one's our long leg, the 21 is our long leg, and the y is our hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. So we have our short leg is x. Our long leg is 21, so I'm going to use that in a minute. And then my hypotenuse is the pink one, that's y. So the known value, the one I know for sure, is the 21. So how do I go from that 21 back to that short leg? I'm going to take that 21. Since I'm getting smaller, I'm not going to multiply by the square root of 3. I'm going to divide by the square root of 3. So again, we're just going to rationalize this denominator. Times root 3 over root 3. This ends up giving me 21 root 3 over root 9, which is 3. 21 divided by 3 gives me whole number 7 root 3. So my y value is going to be 7 root 3. Y is 7 root 3. Okay? So if y is, no, I'm sorry, that's x. X is 7 root 3. If x is 7 root 3, why does that help me find y? Well, y is my hypotenuse. So to go from my short leg to my hypotenuse, I'm going to double the yellow piece. So what is the current yellow piece? Even though it doesn't look very pretty, it's 7 root 3. I'm going to multiply that by 2. And so that is going to be 7 wholes times 2 wholes, which is going to be 14 root 3. It's kind of messy looking, but that is 14 root 3 for this value right here. Which makes sense because 7 root 3 doubled is 14 root 3. Then we have 7 root 3 to get to the long leg. That would be 7 root 9, which is 7 times 3, which is 21. Okay, so you can always go back and check these relationships using the rules. All right, we're going to skip this one for now because that is very similar to what we just did. All right, so let's look at one where it has a short leg, but it has a short leg that looks scary. So there is our 30-degree angle, is our shortest side across from it. And so then there's our hypotenuse, and here's our long leg. So how do I get from my short leg to my long leg, from SL to LL? We know that we're going to multiply times the square root of 3. And so I'm going to take 6 root 5, which is currently the yellow piece, and I'm going to multiply that times the square root of 3. So what does that turn into? That's going to turn into 6 root 15. That is fully simplified because there's not a perfect square that I can take out of that besides root 1, and so that is fully simplified. How do I go from my short leg to my hypotenuse? Here's my hypotenuse, HYP. I'm going to double the yellow piece. So I'm going to take my current yellow. My current yellow is 6 root 5. I'm going to take 6 root 5, and I'm going to multiply that by 2 wholes. So what is 6 times 2? That gives me 12 root 5. 12 root 5 is what remains for my hypotenuse. So x is 12 root 5. And then our y was, let me change that. Our y was 6 root 15. Just trying to color code this for my key so it looks pretty later. So I've got it all together. All right, let's move over to here. So this next problem, I want you to pause the video if you're working on this right now and try it. This next problem, highlight your 30-degree angle and find your short leg. And then click play and see how you did. Here's my short leg. I need to find it. I've got my hypotenuse on this one. There's my hypotenuse. And then here is my long leg. Okay. So I have the 8 root 6. How do I get from that hypotenuse, HYP, back to the short leg? I'm going to get smaller, so instead of multiplying by 2, I'm going to divide by 2. 8 root 6 divided by 2 is going to give me 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. So my short leg is 4 root 6. 4 root 6 is what x is. Why does knowing 4 root 6 help me find y? Because if I have my short leg, to get to my long leg, I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3. It's getting bigger, so I multiply. So I take the yellow, the current yellow, which doesn't look very pretty. It's 4 root 6. I'm not going to be afraid of that. And I'm going to multiply that by a factor of root 3. What does that become? This is where it gets a little bit trickier. That becomes 4 root 18. The only thing you need to do with that 4 root 18 is make sure that you have fully simplified it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break that down. 4 root 18, there's a perfect square that lives in 18. That's going to be 4 root 9 root 2, which is going to simplify to 4 times whole number 3 root 2. So that's going to simplify to 12 root 2. So 12 root 2 is what that blue one is going to fully simplify to. 12 root 2. I know that that's a lot going on with radicals, but that's why we practiced those for 2 days before we started all of this. So that one was probably the hardest one we've done so far. All right, let's do a few of these last ones. Now, I have a 45, 45, 90 triangle touching a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So here's my hypotenuse, there's my long leg, and here's my short leg in the 30, 60, 90. And then I have a 45, 45, 90. How do I know that? Because both of those are going to be 45 degrees. So this is putting together 2 skills that we've learned. So since this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, I know that these 2 blue pieces are going to be the same amount because that's an isosceles triangle. So if that one is 5, x is also going to be 5. So this blue amount, x, is going to be 5. How does that help me find y? Well, remember to go from the a leg of a 45, 45, 90 to a hypotenuse. We are going to multiply by a factor of root 2. So I'm going to take the blue amount, and I'm going to multiply that times root 2. What is 5 times root 2? It is just going to be 5 root 2. 5 root 2 is going to be my, I'll put that in a different color. We'll call that green. 5 root 2 is going to be my hypotenuse of that shape. Okay, so that is 5 root 2. For what letter was that? Y. I'm writing on top of it, so my letters are disappearing. Okay, why did I need to find this 5 first? Because in this 30, 60, 90 triangle, I didn't know any numbers besides, at the beginning, besides I only had 3 variables. So now that if I know that this is a 5, I have the long leg. That is the long leg because this is 30 degrees. So how do I go from the long leg to the short leg? I'm going to divide by the square root of 3. So I'm going to do that over here real quick. That is going to be 5 divided by the square root of 3. So I'm going to write that right here, 5 divided by root 3. I'm just going to show my work over here because it's a little bit easier. Again, we're going to have to rationalize that denominator so that there's no more radicals in the denominator, and we're going to simplify that. That becomes 5 root 3 over 3. So our y value, in yellow, I'm going to write that is 5 root 3 over 3. So that is that's z, 5 root 3 over 3. Okay, That is my short leg. So if my short leg is, it looks crazy, 5 root 3 over 3, it's that full expression. If that full expression is 5 root 3 over 3, how do I go from that expression to the hypotenuse? We're getting bigger, so we're going to multiply by 2. So I'm going to take that yellow thing, 5 root 3 over 3, and I'm going to multiply that by 2, which is the same thing as 2 over 1, if you want to write it that way, since those are both fractions now. And so there's an understood 1 under there, and so what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that out. That would be my whole numbers. Let's do that. 5 times 2 is going to be 10. So that is going to be 10 root 3 over 3. 10 root 3 over 3. So my W value is 10 root 3 over 3. That's my hypotenuse, which is 5 root 3 over 3 doubled. Okay. So we had a 30, 60, 90 connected to a 45, 45, 90. They were overlapping. Let's look at this problem. This is a trapezoid. We always pause and say it's a trap when we're on this problem. So here is my 2 root 3 value, and I don't see a triangle in the shape yet. But we know that since it is a trapezoid, I can create a height right here of this trapezoid. And so that is going to be a 90-degree angle right there, which creates a 30, 60, 90 triangle in this the left-hand side. Okay, so that's a 30, 60, 90. And so now I can copy this 2 root 3 that's in blue right here over to the other side because they're going to be the same height. Okay, so now I have the long leg. How do I get to the short leg? Oh, goodness, that is the wrong thing. How do I get to the short leg? Well, remember the short leg from the long leg, we're going to divide by the square root of 3 because it's getting smaller. Okay, so when you do that, that's going to be 2 root 3 over root 3. Those root 3's cancel out, which makes this way easier. This whole thing right here is just 2. This whole thing is 2. That was not one of the letters I'm looking for, but I'm going to use it to find one of the other letters later. Also, I have to use that to find the hypotenuse. So if that short leg is 2, what is our hypotenuse? Remember, the hypotenuse is going to be that yellow amount, which is currently 2, times 2. What is 2 times 2? 4. So my A value is 4. Okay. This full green amount, this whole thing, was 5. So if I have the full amount, the top of the trap is what we said in class. The top of the trap is 5. This little piece is 2. So how do I find this bottom piece facing the same way down here? 5 minus 2 is going to give me 3 for that B value. 3 is going to be B. So we were able to find the other base of the trapezoid. We'll talk more about those later in another unit. But I found B by doing 5 minus 2. All right, this question is, it gives you an equilateral triangle, but you don't have a picture, so if in doubt, you're always going to draw it out. So this is an equilateral triangle where all the sides are the same and all of the angles are 60. And it tells us that the lengths of that equilateral triangle, so those pieces on the outside, are going to be 12. All of them are going to be 12. So I'm going to fill that in. This is 12. That's my, it's going to end up being my hypotenuse because it says we want to find the altitude of this triangle. So when it says that, that just means drop in an altitude from one of these vertices. That makes this a 30, 60, 90 triangle. I'm going to zoom this in and write 30 and 30. That bisects that angle. So this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle now. And we want to find the height, which is going to be our long leg. Okay, so this is our long leg. How do we find our long leg? What we're going to do is we are going to take our short leg. Well, goodness, we don't have our short leg. So pause there. We don't have our short legs, but we can find it. It's just going to be half. That triangle gets bisected by that blue altitude. And so it's going to be half of 12. We could go ahead and take that from the hypotenuse if you wanted to, though. We could take the 12 and we could divide that by 2. 12 divided by 2 is going to give me that 6. So my short leg is 6. So how do you get to the long leg? We are going to multiply times the square root of 3. So that's going to be 6 times root 3. So my blue amount is going to be 6 root 3. 6 root 3 inches. Okay. Last one. The altitude of an equilateral triangle. So we're going to go ahead and just give ourselves a quick picture. The altitude this time is 24. They go in telling us what it is. Of course, this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So there's 30, there's 60, like we just talked about. And the altitude, or the long leg, is going to be 24. We want to find the side length. And so what we're going to do that is we're going to go back to the short leg. So to go to the short leg, you're going to divide by the square root of 3. So the altitude is 24. We're going to do 24 divided by root 3. Of course, we got to rationalize that. So we're going to multiply by root 3 over root 3. This is going to be 24 root 3 over 3. 24 over 3 is 8. So that's 8 root 3. Okay? So if that is 8 root 3, the short leg is 8 root 3. So let's write that on there in yellow. If that is 8 root 3, how do I find the hypotenuse? I am just going to double that. So what is 8 root 3 doubled? 8 root 3 times 2. 8 root 3 times 2 wholes. It's going to be 8 times 2, which gives me 16 root 3 for the side length of this equilateral triangle. If you wanted to find the perimeter, I would just multiply that by 3, but they only asked us to find the side length, which we just did. So your homework is on the back. We did a few of these in class. You can see with one of my other classes, but it is those problems on the back, and we will check that tomorrow. Y'all have a fabulous weekend.